Video on imaginary numbers, and when you talk about imaginary numbers, what we're referring to is the square root of negative numbers, like the square root of -1. That gives us our first imaginary number, I. Now we're going to step back a moment and talk about, well, first of all, how did we get to this? Why does this make sense? And why the word imaginary? Where's that coming from? Well, it kind of goes back to the first group of numbers that we usually think of, 1 and 2. These are whole numbers. And notice we're starting at 1. So we call these counting numbers. Typically the first types of numbers that we think about when we learn in school, and also when we think about our daily lives. We're counting what we actually have. So we have this group of numbers. And what's fun in math is that when we start to ask questions about these numbers or play around with them, and we ask, well, what happens if I do this? We get new types of numbers. For example, if we have these numbers, it's almost a natural question to ask, what if we did 1 minus itself? What do we get? Well, notice we don't have any numbers that kind of answer that question, so we need to create a new type of number, 0, which is a big step, a big leap from this group of numbers to here. And recall that when we include 0 in our numbers with these, we call them whole numbers. So notice we ask a simple question, what if we take a number minus itself, and then we get a new type of number? Well, this keeps happening if we ask different types of questions. Let me change that color. What if we asked, well, using blue again, so try purple. What if we asked not a number minus itself, but what if I took one number minus 2? Well, we don't have a number to answer that, so we need to think about negative numbers. And we call them integers. So again, all we did was ask this question, well, what if I took one number minus a larger number? And then we have a new type of number to think about. And this keeps going. What if I asked, well, what's 1 divided by 2? Well, I don't have a number yet that deals with this, so I have to have fractions. 1/2, and we call them rational numbers. And then we can keep asking different types of questions. And when we get different types of questions, we have to have different types of numbers, right? Now, not every question leads to a new type of number, but we're going to keep looking at those specifically. What if we talked about square roots? That's kind of dark. Let me fix that. What if we talked about the square root of a number? Well, the square root of 1 is 1 because 1 times 1 is 1. The square root of 4 is 2 because 2 times 2 is 4. What about these other numbers? What if I took the square root of the number right after 1, 2? What happens? Well, we don't have an answer for this here. And in fact, none of these numbers give us an answer. There's no fraction that equals this. There's no negative number. 0 doesn't equal it, no whole number. So we have irrational numbers. Right? This can't be written as a fraction. That's what an irrational number is. There's no rational number that equals the square root of 2. And in fact, if we ask or look more closely at this group right here, the integers, we enter the imaginary numbers. So that's actually what we're saying up here. Look at this. We have the square root of -1, the square root of a negative number. Well, in all of these groups, we don't have the answer to this. There's no number that equals the square root of -1. Just like when we started, we had 1 minus 1, and there was no number to answer that, so we had to make a new type of number. So here, when we say, well, what's the square root of -1? We don't have a number for that, and here's why. Let's look at the square root of 1. That equals either +1, because 1 times +1, write this over here, because 1 times 1 is 1. Or -1, because -1, a negative times a negative is a positive. And if you want to go over why that's true, there are other videos. Just like the square root of 4, well, that equals 2 because 2 times 2 is 4. Or -2 because -2 times -2 is also 4. So -1, square root of -1, does that equal -1? It does not, because -1 times a -1 equals +1. We need to get this as a -1. So we start to think, well, what number would answer this question? And we don't have anything. So we had to make a new type of number, and we call that imaginary. So the imaginary numbers are really interesting and fun to play with. And we'll go over them more in the next video. But the basic idea is that you have a negative square root, like square root of -1. You need a new type of number to think about it. And that's what an imaginary number is.